of you that the enemy hasn't taken anything from you. You just gave it to him. Can I just pastor you for a minute? Enemy didn't steal it. You took it out of your wallet and you just swiped it and swiped it and swiped it and tapped it and stuck it in. Woo! Yeah, I need that. I need those shoes. Need that car. Need that phone. Need that. Woo! Woo! Yeah. The enemy didn't take it from you. You just kept buying stuff you don't need with money you don't have. Put it on credit, and MasterCard is now your master. You're discovering what Discover really cost you. You know what I'm saying? I believe there are three kind of people in the world: the haves, the have-nots, and the have not yet paid for it. And that last one, boy, it leads to bondage, doesn't it? Yes, sir. Because you buying stuff with money you don't have, thinking I need this, and I'm going to get that, and if I get that, then maybe I can feel better, and it's binding you up. Most spiritual thing you can do is stop spending money you don't have. Most spiritual thing you do, some of you need plastic surgery. And I'm talking about cut up some plastic cards. So just say, I don't need that anymore in my life. I'm not going to be controlled by that anymore. Now Jesus, he knew that this was going to be a problem for us, an attack on our mind and our thinking. And he says this over 2,000 years ago in Matthew 6:24. He said, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. Now we get that. Like, okay, we understand where he's going with this. And I remember as a kid, I understood this until he got to this next sentence. You cannot serve both God and what? Money. I mean, you would think he would say you cannot serve both God and the devil, right? But God and money? What you have to understand is in the original language, it's not money. It actually is mammon. And mammon is more than just money. Mammon is a spirit of a false god. It's a spirit of mammon. It's an Aramaic word that came from the Syrian god of riches back in the day of Babylon. Babylon, found in Genesis 11, was the place where they built the Tower of Babel. And they built that Tower of Babel to say, we can get to God on our own. We can get to heaven on our own. We don't need God. So this comes from the same place that came from. That spirit is still alive today. And the spirit of mammon, which is can get on money, will actually tell you you don't need God. You can do it on your own. If you just make enough money, you're going to be secure. If you just make enough money, you're going to be happy. If you just make enough money, you'll have peace. If you just make enough money, you'll be respected. The spirit of mammon makes promises it cannot keep. Because God is the only one that can give you peace. Amen. God is the only one that can make your marriage great. God is the only one that can give you joy. God is the only one that can keep a family together. Not money. Dear God, look at all around. Look at the people with money. They ain't got none of that. So we got to be on guard about what the spirit of money will try to do to us. And I'm not just talking about people in debt, because there's a lot of people, a lot of Christians that have a lot of money that are depending on the money instead of depending on God. Nothing wrong with having a lot of money. Look in the Bible. Abraham had a lot of money. David had a lot of money. Solomon had a lot of money. Lazarus, the friend of Jesus who helped to financially care for his ministry, had a lot of money. It's not about having money. It's making sure your money doesn't have you, right? Money's not the problem. Trusting in money is the problem. Because God doesn't want me to trust in anybody or anything else besides him every moment of every day. So how do we fight back in this area? Because it's something that affects all of us, regardless if you have a lot or you ain't got none. It's an area that we fight. The first thing is you got to understand what God says about money and about possessions. And you've heard me say before that in this Bible, there are about 500 verses on faith, what faith is, how to get more of it, what prayer is, how to pray, what prayer does. 500 verses on faith, 500 verses on prayer, but there's over 2,000 verses on money and possessions. 2,000! More than 4 times as much than prayer. Why would God do that? Why would God talk about it that much unless God knows something that we don't know? Yep. You've heard me say that our possessions have the power to possess us. So we have to understand that where that belongs and where that goes. And so if you need help getting back control and fighting in this area and getting God's perspective about money, one of the practical things that we do at the church is we have a class called Financial Peace University. And we have helped thousands and thousands of people get a biblical understanding about money, what God says about it. And as a result, they've gotten themselves out of debt. They've paid off college loans, they paid off mortgages, they paid off their cars, they're living completely debt-free. But Financial Peace University is not just for people that are struggling financially. It's actually to help all of us, because some of us are not struggling with debt, but we're spending it as fast as it's coming in. Like, where'd it go? I just got paid and it's already gone. True, dear Lord, it's gone, right? And so Financial Peace University helps you gain spiritual authority back over your finances, and don't let your finances control you, but you actually control it. And we got all that information along with lots of other resources. You can just text the word life to 441 and get on. Let me give you a verse and then we'll move on. Proverbs 21:5, plan carefully and you'll have plenty. If you act too quickly, you'll never have enough. Plan carefully and you'll have plenty. If you act too quickly, you'll never have enough. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do when there's an attack is work the process. God is a God of order and process. Okay, third area. The third area that we've got to fight to take back what is ours is the most important of all the areas. And it's in our relationships. We got to fight for our people, for the relationships that God has put in our lives. And I will tell you that what I have witnessed is this is the area where the enemy fights the hardest. It's in our relationships. And you know it's true. The place that I've seen the greatest loss, the greatest destruction, have been in relationships. In marriages and homes, siblings that won't talk to each other anymore, friends that get all turned around and upside down because of something that somebody said or somebody posted or something did, and all of a sudden, we're all offended. Can't talk to each other. That's the enemy. Work in his work. Don't let him work. Don't let him do what he's trying to do. Now, I can't dig as deep into this as I need to today. So, next week, we're going to spend a little more time in this area. I did that to get you back next week. Sorry. And here's what I know. We've all got relationships in our lives where the enemy has been working overtime. And I want to help you spiritually fight back, to take back relationships that have been broken, that have been torn apart. God is a God of reconciliation. He merges and brings back together what has been torn apart. And he wants you to be a part of reconciling and reconciliation. Let me give you one verse that will help you in this area, and then we'll dig into this more next week. Ephesians 6:12. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and against the authorities and against the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Your struggle is not against flesh and blood, which means too many of us are fighting the wrong enemy, right? We think that other person is the enemy. We think our spouse is the enemy. We think that guy at work is the enemy. We think our neighbor and their dog that goes in our yard, they're the enemy. No, they're not your enemy. You're not wrestling against flesh and blood. You have a spiritual battle on your hands, so you better know how to fight spiritually. Next week, we're going to dive into Ephesians 6, which is an entire passage to help you fight the spiritual battle that we're in. But today, let me give you two challenges that have helped me in my spiritual fight, regardless of what battle I might find myself in. And I believe they're going to help you this week. Number one, write this down. You've got to take the authority. You've got to understand the authority given to you in Christ, by Christ. Too many of us have left the authority sitting on the floor. We got to fight from a place of authority. Romans chapter 16 tells us that the enemy is already under our feet. Why don't you fight from it that way? Right? Right? Why don't we start there? It says in Ephesians 2:6 that God has already raised us up with Christ and seated you in heavenly places right? Because you belong to Jesus. That means you're already there. Not talking about heaven in that verse. Read the passage. He's talking about here and now, because you are in Christ and Christ is in you. You are already seated with Christ in heavenly places. Why don't we start acting like that? Why don't we start praying like that? Already over it, already above it, already fighting that way, taking the authority over it. Like, I'm not going to be frightened when my enemy comes at me, because greater is he that's within me than he that's within the world. Now, what you got to see is that your authority is directly connected to your identity. Because you are in Christ and Christ is in you, you have a supernatural, God-given authority in your life to fight the enemy. So take the authority. Now, if you don't have that new identity, then you don't have that authority.